How's it going today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
We tend to just dive right into these episodes. So first things first, you're walking down the street. You're in an Inflection AI sweatshirt. Someone says, "What is Inflection AI?" What do you tell them?
Oh, that's easy. We're an end-to-end turnkey solution for AI that can be owned from the source code up, run securely. It's inside your company's network, and it never leaves your trusted AI environment. But maybe a simpler way of saying it is you own your own intelligence.
I like that. And how? What was the? I always ask people. There's several like moments that lead up to building companies and wanting to be a part of these companies. What were the moments that led up to Inflection AI? That okay, until the final pillar where it's like I'm doing it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been in the technology industry for decades. I mean, I remember back in the 90s when we were actually discussing agents, right? And agents that would talk together and do all of these things and what AI would look like. And to me, one of the important things was always putting not just AI out there, this technology, right? Like, great, we've got a new engine, but how does it actually impact people? How do we actually have it make our lives better? How does it augment us, right? Not just be some technology out there. And so, running up, I actually saw some early previews of GPT, and then have been actually working with companies that were using AI for lots of different projects, sometimes neuroscience or neurotechnology or health and medicine. And then when the beginnings of Inflection started, I was having conversations with Reid Hoffman, and he and I started talking more and more about this. And when the opportunity came to help lead Inflection into the next chapter of where it goes and what happens with Inflection, I was incredibly excited because this is an opportunity to really have impact on all of our systems and do it in a way that actually continues to be human-centered around what we do.
And as we were first starting, like, what were some of maybe the initial blockers that you ran into that you had to kind of get past?
Yeah, I'd argue some of those things still exist, right? But some of it is just education, right? So the word AI can mean a million different things. The word agentic can mean a million different things. Right? Fine-tuning. What does fine-tuning really mean? And so I think a lot of our conversations are around, well, all right, let's get rid of the words for a second. What is it you're trying to do? Right? How does this help you do a thing? How does it augment what you are trying to get solved? And so the education part has been really interesting. It sort of continues, I think, because the technology is evolving. We're learning new ways to use it, and yet there's still a lot of uncertainty about what it really is.
I'd be curious. You mentioned agents like back years ago, right? You were having these initial conversations were coming up.
Yeah.
What were those conversations like back then, and maybe how close were they to where we are today with agents?
Yeah. So I'll use a couple of examples. Actually, I'll use three examples. Right? There are these guys, Yoav Sholem and Aviv Bergman, this place called Interval Research, and we're talking about little programs that were either evolving genetically, right, and then would sort of evolve into behaviors, or programs that could talk to each other and negotiate on your behalf, or even in the case of Alan Seifer, things that could watch what you're doing, learn what you're doing, and then do it for you, right? And as I think about it now, those are some of the things that we talk about, right? Can something at the highest level watch what I'm doing, or can it just take some action for me? And it's one of the reasons why we've been working with a range of technologies and partnerships, some where it's the pragmatic block and tackle of getting something done deterministically, so it happens. And and in some cases it's to sort of further out research of, what if we could do this for us.
Super interesting. It's the speed at which everything is progressing is the most interesting piece, right? It seems like if someone went away on vacation for 2-3 weeks and they came back, it would be a different like there would be new information, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, I think the thing that's interesting is we've had lots of these ideas for a long time, but we now have the capabilities to do it as well. This move, which is a scary move for a lot of people, from all of these highly deterministic systems to probabilistic systems, right? And all of the data that's involved in that. And so, part of this, as I've watched, is this shift also from like going to just talk about the model to talking about the architectures, so that you actually can deal with the combination of, the probabilistic, which gets you all of this magic, and the deterministic, which actually is, oh no, I really want that specific thing done.
And what is your advice to, like, let's take let's kind of go in a different direction here, to these leaders. Now, this is one of my favorite questions. In terms of the organizations that aren't implementing like AI into their workflow, like, could we come up with like and I know this isn't set in stone, right? But I've been asking a lot of people, like, what would be your 90-day plan for a company that's maybe not leveraging AI and should, to get them started?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think one of the things that we're finding when we work with companies, as an example, like we run these voice of the customer meetings, and I find it funny because sometimes we'll actually have someone come up and say, "Oh yeah, nobody's actually listened to me about what it is that I'm trying to do," right? Which in the end is it's good design, right? That's how you build things. And so for these companies, what I think is happening is they're getting a lot of pressure from their boards, saying, "Okay, we need some AI pixie dust. Tell us, what's your plan for the AI pixie dust?" But the right thing to do is first really be clear on what it is you think you need, like what are your real pain points and where are the possibilities, right? To do some experiments, and work with teams that are going to work with you and listen to you, and maybe also not be so afraid of the possibilities, right? Because I think there's a rightly so, there's a lot of conservative, but if you work with the right partners, for instance, if you're worried about your data, which is one of the things we hear is a big fear, is like, I've got my data and I'm afraid that it's going to go off somewhere and all of a sudden everybody will have it, or I'm a regulated industry and we can't have this happen. You still should be experimenting. You just need to find the right partners for doing that, right?
How do you calm those people down and answer their questions, right? In terms of like, I worry about because that's probably one of the biggest things you hear, right, when talking with companies, is I am worried about my data and what happens, how do you keep it secure? So how do you usually answer that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of ways, right? One, we'll work through, at least in our case, we're going to work through solutions with them. We have one of our solutions actually works on-prem, so they get to control what happens with their data, even if it is fine-tuning that actually is happening locally. I mean, it is true that even if folks have all this like SOC 2 compliance or other things, eventually there is a point where it goes to an LLM where it gets decoded, and that can worry folks. And so we can do something, and we have done this, for instance, in the case of some of our customers where we have it there, they control the data is all on their systems, and so they don't have to worry about it going out. And you were asked about that 90-day process. I think part of it is spend the first months, or first month really figuring out what that problem is, do some experiments, and then get the results from that, constantly have a learning loop, and execute from there. And I know that sounds easy. It's like saying, well, just make some hover cars on the moon. But I think maybe the unusual part is that a lot of times there's a bad impedance match between someone saying, hey, look, I've got this amazing thing, and the company saying, well, I need to achieve this. Can you help? And then they stop talking.
Interesting. I wanted to, while we had you here, to pick your brain, like, recently went through Y, like I went through all the Y Combinator startups from this recent batch, right? I think it was like 86% are AI right now, which I mean it signals the times that we're in. It doesn't have to be within YC, but I like to usually do a segment of this show that's kind of show them some love. So, like, are there any companies that you're particularly fond of outside of what you're doing that you want to spotlight here today?
Sure. I'm going to spotlight some, but they're going to be weird.
Okay, good, good.
So, for instance, there's a company called Wave, right, which is helping people with wellness, and they've got a lot of humans involved. But they're also using AI as an approach for that, right? And I think that's really interesting. I mean, one of the places we came from was around not just IQ but emotional intelligence, and it wasn't just because it's nice, but it actually has an impact on how we, work, how we use our tools, and so I love seeing them do that. There's another company called Cognition, right, which is using LLMs as a way to help people communicate when they've lost their ability to communicate. And this, to me, is super powerful, right? I mean, it's a game changer. I was talking with somebody who had been unable to communicate before, and all of a sudden, with ALS, right? The reason those are interesting is both because of the impact it has today, but also you can imagine extrapolating out where that technology reaches out to the rest of us, so that we can have things that help us in our daily lives as well.
And can you talk me through?
I can tell you more if you'd like. But that's,
no. That was perfect. It's just a short segment. Show them some love, and you did. Yeah. So I appreciate that. What I wanted to really ask is obviously, like, what type of organizations? I know you can work with a variety of different types of organizations, but like, what's kind of been that you've seen the more common, I guess, not sweet spot, but the most common type of organizations that you end up working with? I know you probably can't share too much about like the organizations, but if it's possible, I would just be curious, and then maybe why you think that is. Whatever.
Yeah. I think one of the ways, and maybe underneath that question is, and where does it matter? Where does it have impact? Right? And I think part of it is that in the organizational structures and the systems that we have built within our organizations, as you grow, there's the need for more communication. There's a need for more bureaucracy. There's a need for more systems. And one of the things that we're finding is that a lot of that sort of explicit bureaucratic drudge work can be made implicit, that our AI systems can infer what's happening and help with that. Right? As an example, if someone is supposed to be taking a bunch of actions in their work and recording all of that, maybe the example of a doctor, for instance, right? Instead of 15 minutes talking to a patient and 15 minutes typing a bunch of stuff in, that should just all be automated. Right? And I like that because that also means that moves people closer to spending more time as humans together, as opposed to spending more time putting in a bunch of data into the computers. And so those kinds of places, I think it has a lot of impact. Where there are a lot of heterogeneous systems where you can bring them together. One of the reasons why we've been partnering with UiPath as a starting point for some of the things we do is that it takes hundreds of different systems that we can put the inference part together and the probabilistic part, and then actually do the right things across all those systems. And that lets people who are doing the work focus on more of the cognitive activities and less on the sort of grind and drudge work of that.
When you, one of the things I wanted to make sure I asked you to before, as we get towards these are typically 15, 20 minutes. So
yeah.
When you first took over as CEO at Inflection AI, I am curious about like newly appointed CEOs, like when that happens. Yeah. was your kind of internal process to get up to speed for like personally for those first couple months? And then when did you feel like you started hitting your stride after that point?
Yeah. Um, I mean, the first thing is to always listen. I mean, there's this interesting book called The First 90 Days. You were asking about 90 days, right? And it's meant for leaders when they're taking a new role. And I like it because it's basically saying, look, spend 30 days coming in and listening, talking to people, really understanding what's there. Then spend the next 30 days working through plans and how you're going to shift after you've heard these things. And you have fresh eyes, right? I mean, that's the brilliant part, is you have fresh eyes for the system. And then the next 30 days after that, executing. And now, of course, that's theory, not practice, right? Nothing is ever that clean. But I think it's a good framing model, right? That's how you would design a good product. That's how you would think about, a new organization, right? And so I think about that a lot. And for me, I just care a lot about collaboration. I think that makes a huge difference in the things that we do. And so once I had brought on my leadership team, the executive team for this, that's when I felt like we were starting to click. Right? Because now you're accelerating, you're moving faster, and you start to understand the systems that you have better. You are not just, it's not just the ideas from you, but it's the collaboration of all of those things. And we discover, I mean, I knew this going in, but I don't know how familiar you are with Inflection and Pi and some of the pieces that were there before.
The assistant, Pi the assistant?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a little, not as much as I would like.
Yeah, so I mean, the interesting thing is that it already was a great test case for working at scale. I mean, there were 14 million people who had gone through using Pi, right? And the LLM itself was one of the, I mean, there were maybe, 7 to 10 companies in the world that can actually converge a technology at this scale. And so part of that, you hear those numbers, you're like, wow, that's amazing. But you really actually want to understand what that means, right? Like, why does that kind of scale matter? Because lots of people can talk about proof of concepts, but really making these things work is different. And so, once we got a handle on that, that started, again, getting things to click, and you build, I actually, Jared, I don't know as much about your background, but I mean, have you been an entrepreneur as well, or
yeah. So I had a company called Block Health, which we were aiming to be like TurboTax for licensing, credentialing healthcare professionals.
Oh yeah.
Ran that for 5 years. Ended up selling that to a company called SteadyMD 2 years ago, and then decided to focus on having these fun conversations where I get to meet amazing leaders, entrepreneurs like yourself. But yeah, that's like the short version of me.
Yeah, so I'm sure you've had that experience, right? And you start to, it's also up and down, right? There's never, I just don't believe in these direct trajectories, right? There's always something that is, there might be a carrier wave, but there's always these things that are sort of sinusoidal around them as well.
It's kind of funny when you think just through early educational like experiences too, like we're talking like high school, even like early even college. You talk about listening, like it seems like we don't place maybe enough emphasis on that, like at the youngest of ages and going through, because anyone, like even if you were just starting a job where you're not the CEO of the company, right? Just spending some time to truly listen to people and understand. And do you think this is kind of separate? Just you kind of brought it up with me, but
yeah.
Do you think we don't necessarily always do a great, not saying us, but leaders in general, of when they hire someone new, we kind of have expectations in many cases that it needs to be hit the ground running, when probably the best thing for them is actually have some conversations for the next at least few weeks to get a grasp on, because you know how many people don't even know what their company does and they work there? Like it's kind of crazy. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, this is why we we had we acquired this company. There's a engineering leader that I know, super smart. He's been at Twitter and LinkedIn as an engineering leader, and I was talking to him. I said, right now you have fresh eyes. So I would love to hear what you see, and understand what it is that you are seeing that we aren't seeing, because we've been here now for a while, and have that as a discussion. And this is going to sound cheesy, but like bringing it all the way back to why I think Inflection is interesting is the model and the architecture for the system were literally built for conversation and for not just high IQ but high EQ, which means that when you're trying to work with it, it's not just that you get a book report, it's that you actually are in dialogue. And I think that dialogue is one of the most important new inventions that we haven't really thought about with our technology, is like to be in dialogue with our systems in a way that's human and not just press a button, get a report back. And so I have high hopes that in some ways, as we build these systems, they actually are helping improve our organizations as well, which, like I said, that sounds a little goofy, but I think it's a real possibility.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. I just I interviewed the CEO of LiveKit about, what was it, a week or two ago, and we were laughing about how just talking to systems has become like, that wouldn't have been something that you'd feel comfortable doing. Now, like, so many people, kudos to what OpenAI has done with ChatGPT, right, in terms of like helping people start to get more comfortable with like talking to something. But I think it's kind of what Siri tried to do for the longest time, and having conversation, but it was not obviously at the level that we're at today. But do you think that'll be a big thing? Like, we look out next 5 years, like more of us maybe talking with our computers than even like typing?
Yeah, no, look, this is the first time in history where instead of us going to our machines and learning the machine's language so we can work with the machine, this thing that we created, that it's coming to us. It's learned our language, and that means that the things that might have taken like lots of programming or 1,000 button pushes or all this process, we should be able to express what it is we want to do. The system, through dialogue, infers that and then gets it done and helps us, right? No, I actually think that while there's been research in things like conversational interface for years, we now actually are able to, as you said, I love Siri and Alexa. I think that for their time, they were great. Yeah. But we can do so much more now.
And they'll get better too. Yeah, and they'll get better as a result as well.
Let's hope. Yeah,
we hope. Last question for you before we wrap up here.
Yeah.
Human X, I'm really excited. It's going to be here in March. It'll be here before we know it. What are you thinking about this event?
I am incredibly excited for the event. It's first time that I've actually been to one of Stefan's events, but I've known him for a long time. I know what he's capable of. And so everything that I have heard about the event, the people that I know I'm going to see, the discussions that I'm going to have, I'm totally excited for that.
It might be, especially for a first-year event, one of the best speaker lineups. Really good speakers. Everyone seems to be really hyped about it, so I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see you there in person in not too long.
Yeah. Thanks, Jared. I was looking forward to meeting you in person.
Absolutely. Great meeting you.
Yeah, likewise.